Welcome to the Explainer. So, we've all seen rituals, right? Actions that are repeated so often they've just become second nature. But have you ever stopped to think about what happens when the reason, the why, behind that action gets lost? Today, we're going to dive into a really fascinating idea: how a powerful tool designed for learning can, over time, become just an empty shell, totally disconnected from its original purpose. Okay, let's start by just flipping our whole perspective on its head with this one question. What if ritual isn't just about belief? What if the physical movements themselves were never actually the point? What if they were a sophisticated piece of technology designed for a very, very specific purpose? The source we're digging into here calls this a teaching interface. Just think about that for a second. Imagine your body as the hardware. The movements are like the software, encoding a specific state of awareness. And the repetition? That's just the process that saves the file until it becomes second nature. In other words, it's a curriculum you don't just read, you literally embody it. But here's where things get twisted. This is the crucial point. A system that was designed to train awareness accidentally became an end in itself. The tool for learning, the physical practice, got mistaken for the actual lesson. And right at that moment, the lesson just got frozen in time. So, how does a living, breathing lesson turn into a frozen identity? Well, the source argues this isn't about people having bad intentions. No, it's more like a software bug, a predictable system failure. It's a mechanical trap that honestly can catch any tradition if you give it enough time.
To really get this, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. According to the source, the abstract words, the ones describing these deep internal states of being, they came first. The concepts existed before any of the physical rituals were ever built around them. Okay, this slide is just fascinating because it shows you that translation in action from an internal state to an external movement. So you take the term sujud. It's an internal state of complete ego dissolution, right? That feeling of letting go of the self. Well, that becomes the physical act of prostration. Or ruku. That's a state of grounded holding, of humble stability. That becomes the act of bowing. This was revolutionary. It made these profound internal concepts accessible to everyone, whether you could read or not.
In this slide, it just brilliantly lays out the 6-step process of how that meaning gets lost. It all starts as living, dynamic guidance, which is then taught through physical actions, but then, later generations, they inherit the actions without ever decoding the original meaning. Pretty soon, those actions become a badge of identity. And when something is part of our identity, well, we really resist questioning it, don't we? And right there, boom, the system freezes solid. And the result is this really stark reality. The outward ritual, the physical performance, it continues perfectly. But the inward connection, the whole reason the ritual was created in the first place, it just quietly fades away. The form is still there, but the function is completely gone. Now, this isn't just some harmless mistake. When form replaces function, it doesn't just become empty. It actually creates this dangerous vacuum where confusion and even corruption can really start to grow. And in this vacuum, people start defending the physical motion instead of the meaning behind it. Authority begins to replace individual understanding. And suddenly, the past becomes sacred simply because it's the past, not because its wisdom is still alive and actually understood. In that gap, that space between a perfect physical motion and a totally disconnected mind, that's where hypocrisy grows. It's where power can exploit belief and where corruption can hide behind tradition. Now, the source is really clear on this. This happens not because people are inherently bad, but because the system itself has just stalled out. Awareness stopped moving, and that left a void for something else to fill. So, what's the way out of this trap? Well, the source argues it's not about rebellion or rejecting the whole tradition. The path forward is actually about a profound act of loyalty, returning to the original intent of the entire system. In fact, if you look at the source text itself, it constantly points back to these internal states. It prioritizes things like understanding, active reasoning, deep reflection, and witnessing. The message is pretty unavoidable. If the ritual doesn't awaken your awareness, it's failed, no matter how perfectly you perform it. This leaves us with a really critical choice, a fork in the road. We can abandon the ritual, but then we lose all that grounding, that structure. We can keep on with blind repetition, where the motions go on, but the meaning is just lost. Or we can choose the third path, the path of reconnection, to actively re-inhabit the ritual with knowledge, bringing its original function back to life. So what does it even mean to re-inhabit the ritual? It's a synergy of three parts working together. The body performs the actions, the mind understands what they mean, and your awareness simply witnesses the whole process. When all three of those are engaged, it's like the entire system just comes back online. And this brings us to the key takeaway of this whole analysis. This perspective, it's not about rejecting a tradition or an act of faith. Not at all. It's about restoring its original, powerful function, turning it from a frozen artifact back into a living, breathing technology for growth. You know, the entire problem we've been exploring, this centuries-long drift away from meaning, can really be summed up in one powerful sentence from the source. Humanity mistook repetition for connection. And that is the ultimate message here. This isn't about shattering tradition. It's about breaking open that stone shell to find the living wisdom that's still inside. It's how an ancient ritual becomes a living practice once again. So, as we wrap this up, it leaves us with a pretty provocative thought that goes way beyond any one specific tradition. What inherited actions, what rituals or habits in our own lives are we just performing on autopilot? What lesson is just sitting there, waiting to be unfrozen, if only we choose to re-inhabit it with our own awareness?